Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Riff on This, candid conversations behind the music in Florida. And if you know anything about Florida and the music, you know this is a big old state and we have a ton of talent. But we're here for all of the juicy details and amazing stories flowing through all the genres in the Sunshine State. I'm your host, Samara Kokinas, taking a break from the weather to catch a musical vibe with you. April 1976 played that funky music, hit the airwaves, quickly skyrocketing to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 just 5 months later. The certified platinum single featured a captivating intro which consisted of 7 chords on an electric guitar that had fans flooding the dance floors. That guitarist has also brought his amazing talents to notable groups like Hatchet and currently Foghat. I'm beyond excited to welcome guitarist, songwriter, recording engineer, producer, and music professor, Bryan Bassett, to the show.
Hello.
Welcome.
So glad to be here.
I am excited to have you here. A lot of people, when it comes to different musicians and different bands, you have been in Wild Cherry, you have been in Hatchet, and now you're in Foghat.
Yep. 23 years now, continuously in Foghat, and which seems like a crazy amount of time. But it was nice playing in all those different genres. I mean, 70s, I was in a funk band, and, 80s, I was in a Southern rock band, and, now I've been kicking, English blues and, blues rock now for the last many years.
I love it. You have over 40 years experience as a recording artist and 30 years in the producing and engineering, correct?
Right.
Let's start from the beginning first. So you're not from here, you're from?
I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which in the 70s was a fantastic place to be a musician. I mean, there was dozens of nightclubs all around town. You could play 6 nights a week, and actually they had cover charges up there. So even as a club band, you could make a pretty decent income up there. It was a steel town, so there's lots of after the work partying and rock and roll pretty much all week long, and so many great musicians. And funny enough, I mean, Pittsburgh was really famous from the 40s and 50s for its jazz scene, which there's a documentary on PBS right now that's really fantastic. And, George Benson and, countless other famous jazz musicians, came out of the Pittsburgh area. And so just that carried into the 70s, just the local people's love for live music. Mm-hmm. So it was a great place to play. Grew up like many musicians, playing cover music 4 nights a week and 4 sets a night. And so it was just a really fertile ground to learn my craft. And, I loved it. There's so many great bands and a lot of original music too, which is unusual for a lot of cities have cover bands, of course. But this one, so many bands had so many original music styles, and so it's almost like Seattle became later on. That's how Pittsburgh was in the 70s.
Nice. So what was your first musical memory that you can remember?
Man, that's a good one. But I can remember I was on the football team at my high school, and but I remember I think in the same week I heard like Led Zeppelin 1 and Jimi Hendrix, and then the British Invasion bands just crushed me, So I took a right turn into music, right? Listening to Eric Clapton I know you've interviewed my funny partner, drummer Roger Earl, so, but him being part of Savoy Brown, I mean, they had a big influence, the John Mayall group, Cream, of course, and Fleetwood Mac. I was a big Peter Green fan, one of my favorite guitarists. Of course, Jeff Beck Group, another one of favorite guitarists.
Yes.
Dear Jeff, I'm going to miss him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's what really took me over, that 70 British Invasion, mostly the blues, rock side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you first start playing? Was it just a box guitar, or did you start out on an electric?
I actually have like a Wayne's World story. My first guitar, it was a Harmony Rocket 1. It was a big red guitar with white knobs, and I got it for Christmas.
Nice.
And Santa Claus, my parents bought me that and 2 Jeff Beck records. I mean, talk about,
wow,
putting up a hard thing to follow. But yeah, I loved it. And then I used to take a bus downtown after school and to Lomackin's Music Shop in downtown Pittsburgh, and a Les Paul Goldtop hung in that window. And I literally did the, one day you will be mine,
How old were you?
I think I was 17, and I, worked at a grocery store all summer. Mm-hmm. And my dad pitched in half, and I saved up all my money, and that was my first great guitar, and I loved that thing. So.
And you shined it, and you slept right next to
Absolutely,
it, right? You ate with it, everything. What was your first big break into music, into rock?
There's a lot of great bands, I said, and great musicians around town. There was a band called Wild Cherry, run by Rob Parisi, who's actually lives down here in Florida now as well. And he was disbanding his band, and they were good, really good. And he went on to manage a couple restaurants in, I think it was Weirton, West Virginia, and Steubenville, Ohio, maybe. And then, I said, Rob, if you ever get back in the music business, give me a call,
And he did the Ohio Players, right?
No, he was actually Wild Cherry.
Oh, he was Wild Cherry.
It was like the early version of Wild Cherry, but he disbanded it.
Oh, gosh.
And after about a couple months, I guess he got sick of the restaurant business, and he called me up. He goes, "Okay, Brian, I'm going to put together a new version of Wild Cherry."
Changed my mind.
Right.
I don't like this industry.
I don't like this.
We're going back to music.
Back to music. And we started, got a band. Ronnie Beidel was our drummer. He was a former drummer in a band from, it was called Road Apple. that was our name. Road, like Road Scholar, though.
Yes.
And so clever. and a bass player, Alan Wentz. He was from Detroit, but somehow ended up in Weirton, West Virginia. I think his car broke down, and he had to get an apartment and a job to fix it.
Wow.
But anyway, we got together, and we started playing the clubs, and like I said, tons of work, and we were pretty good, covering all the greatest songs of the day. And we played this club, 2001 Disco, right in Pittsburgh, futuristic at the time. This is 1975. So, the future, 2001, right? So,
Jetsons, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. But we're in there, and we're playing like Robin Trower, Foghat, Deep Purple, rock music. And someone came up to our drummer on a break and said, "You better start playing some funky music, white boy." Someone said that to our drummer.
Really?
Yeah, just like that. And because KC was coming out, David Bowie had Fame, and Commodores. It was, everything was going dance and funk, and the dance floor, the lighted dance floor, of course, would be packed. And then, when it was time for us to play, everyone went and got a drink, and we're playing, Robin Trower, and so. We're like, well, we need to make a shift in style here. So we actually that night in the back room, our drummer said that to our lead singer Rob, and he started writing the lyrics of the song on a napkin that night. And it's really autobiographical. I was a rock and roll singer playing in a rock and roll band.
Yeah.
And someone come up and said that, so we changed our style, and that we recorded that song ourselves on our own dime up in Cleveland. Went to a recording studio with the hopes of getting a 45 of our own production in the local jukeboxes. This is like before internet, of course, and everything. So there was still, one stops every, nightclub, restaurant, you could get your record placed. You were hoping to get an extra $150 a night,
Mm-hmm.
But Rob took it around to some record companies, and eventually we got signed by Sweet City Records, which was part of Epic Records, and they were just a brand new small record company out of Cleveland. And it was owned by the Belkin brothers, who were very huge, famous concert promoters.
Yeah.
They would do Pink Floyd, all across the country. They were major concert promoters. And so they became our managers and record company, which is, I think illegal now.
Yeah, might be a conflict
it's like,
of interest there.
Could you go talk to yourself about giving us a raise? I did, but, it didn't work out.
We had the discussion.
Yeah, I just had that that meeting in my head, and so. But anyhow, but what they did have was the ability to get us on shows, and so we ended up touring with the Commodores. The song went up the charts very fast.
Yeah.
So we literally went from the clubs to arenas in like a month.
Wow.
And I have a funny story about that, but we ended up on tours with the Commodores, Average White Band, who were fantastic. We did some of the shows on the last Jackson 5 tour, Earth, Wind and Fire, That's the Way of the World tour. Pretty much everybody from that, Shaka Khan, Rufus, Brothers Johnson. The musicianship of these bands at that time was so spectacular. We used to play our opening set, and I'd rush backstage and then, get changed and run out to the front house and just to watch the shows,
Oh, wow.
And they were just, George Clinton, Bootsy Collins, all these funk bands. So, I met a lot of people and it was fantastic touring. So that was, a long way of saying that was my big break there, that, that Wild Cherry thing,
Yeah.
that funny comment in the club that gave us a song title.
To know that that was how Play That Funky Music came around, that is hilarious.
Isn't it crazy?
Mean, that is just wild. Do you still have please tell me there's still the napkin with the lyrics?
I hope Rob does. I don't know if he, I never asked him that question, funny enough, but I hope he does,
Yeah.
'cause-
That's iconic.
Yeah, right.
When you sit there and think, at that point in time, you don't realize it, because is it going to be as big as you hope it to be? Sure, it may be, but you don't think about the process along the way that made it so cool.
I remember hearing it on the radio for the first time. We're still driving, to clubs in our, Impala with a trailer, and it came on the radio. We're like, pulled over the side of the road, and did the whole get out of the car, jumping around, and
Right.
But then it went up, went so fast. We never expected it to be that popular.
It's crazy. That song is such a feel-good song.
And it's still there. It's still out there. It's unbelievable. We played it.
I streamed it on the way here,
And
I've streamed
we
it
play
plenty
it
of times.
at the end of our set. Now, we used to play a little bit of it at Foghat shows during our introductions.
Yeah.
But people kept saying, play the whole song, So last season we played the whole song in the encore,
Mm-hmm.
We do a little funny bit about it. My hair that I used to have, which was beautiful, and my velour suits and all that stuff,
It's the velour suit for me.
Yeah, right. And the silk scarves and the Capezio shoes.
Awesome.
I know. So, but it's a funny bit. But then when we play it, people go nuts. And I'm like, Foghat, Wild Cherry. You think it's gonna mesh, but it's just a good song that people love to hear, and everybody gets up and starts dancing. So we play it.
I love it. I love the opening riff is just.
Yeah,
It's so awesome.
Yeah,
it's iconic. You hear it and that's Play That Funky Music. Yes, I can do that. You know what I mean? Like, people just know it.
I just tell people, that when I'm long gone, that'll be the 9 notes that I'm known for. I played a million, but that dun 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 dun. I was like, I know that one.
Right.
So that's nice to be part of that.
Absolutely. So then you went from Wild Cherry. Did you go from Wild Cherry to Molly Hatchet?
Right
Or
after
is
I
it
left
something-
Wild Cherry, about our third album, I was like wanted to do rock funk, sort of like. Let me see who did a good job. Well, Trapeze was a band that I really loved. It had like rock and roll sounds, but funk dance beats. Robert Palmer,
Oh yeah.
that kind of stuff. And Rob was going more in like a Lou Rawls soft R&B direction. So I wanted to play rock and roll guitar.
Yeah.
So I left after the third album, and I had a really great band in Pittsburgh called Airborne, and there was another band called Airborne, so we changed our name to Tumbling Dice, and then we got a cease and desist from the Rolling Stones. So, really,
Tumbling Dice.
yeah, we call,
Yeah, no,
a club band in Pittsburgh. Is someone paying attention? I was like, holy, that's a good law firm.
Yeah.
But so then we changed it to T-Dice. But anyhow, it was a really great band. We had good management. Charlie Brusco was our manager, who now manages Styx, and they had the Outlaws at the time. But we couldn't get a record deal. We had a bunch of original material. We were sort of like a Night Ranger kind of a band. And at that time, unless you had some kind of record connections, it wasn't like now you can make I'm making the next Foghat record on a laptop. So back then you had to go into an expensive recording studio. You had to find distribution, get vinyl printed. That's a long time ago.
I love vinyl though.
Yeah, I do too, and it's so
amazing
amazing that it's coming back, and
I love it.
it's such a cool thing.
I'm so here for it.
I know, me too, and I actually have a lot of my old record collection because I don't throw anything away. So
No, you should never throw vinyl away.
yeah, I have like the
seriously.
history of recording, in my garage, like from the old reel-to-reels, I have
That's
everything I've ever
awesome.
bought, But I digress. But it was funny, so. We had really great bands, couldn't get a deal and everything, and so I decided to move to Florida. I used to vacation here. So I came down to Daytona first, and then, I was just going to take a break for a while, and I actually started working some odd job. Worked at a Radio Shack. I was doing television repair.
Wow, you said Radio Shack. Wow.
I'm really dating myself there.
No. It's just, it took me back for a minute. I was like, I actually pictured that building in Daytona. I grew up in the area. I am from the DeLand area, but still, Daytona's very.
And so I did that for 6 months while looking for a band to play in, and I couldn't really find any bands. There was a couple good rock clubs, the other place, and it was like traveling A circuit rock bands, up and down the coast, the East Coast. But no one had any openings, and there was a lot of solo artists, playing Jimmy Buffett sitting on a stool, and I wasn't going to do that. And then one day I went to DB, well, it was the community college then, but it was Daytona State.
It was DBCC.
It was DBCC
Yes.
then, right? Yeah, that's right. It's Daytona State now. I should know that. I teach there, but
That's cool. I didn't even know that, and I started my college career at DBCC, and then when it became Daytona State, because they had that transfer program to Embry-Riddle, so that's how I did my transfer. But I didn't know you were there. I would have lost it. I would have been like, what? Did they realize who's here?
I came in when Mike Kerb took over the News Journal Center, and a friend of mine ran the program there. He was, from Nashville, on several recording studios in Nashville, Jake Nicely. It's a beautiful program. I mean, it's like Full Sail. People are familiar with Full Sail, but it's a full, they taught recording engineering, music law, quite a few things. It's a beautiful program, and it's at State College, prices, and with really good teachers from Belmont University up in Nashville. So well-staffed, and the building's beautiful. But I taught there. I was it was called contemporary ensemble, which everybody in the program, regardless of whether you're going for engineering or law, had to play in a band, and so I was like the School of Rock guy,
Nice.
So I had a couple classes, and I did it for 8 semesters, which was fun. I enjoyed it, and but where was I going with the story? So
I think Molly Hatchet, right?
Molly Hatchet. Actually, I moved to Florida.
You moved to Florida, yeah.
Right,
I'm skipping ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah,
We're both going to have to take notes here and remember where we were, because I am like a squirrel. I will go in hard right or hard
I need
left.
my own timeline in front of me just to remember. But anyhow, I went to DBCC, and they had a night with Noble Watts, who was a famous DeLand musician, saxophonist, famous in the 50s. And it was for a scholarship charity concert, and there was a band called the Midnight Creepers there, and Bob Greenlee and Noble Watts was there, Mark Hodson, Scott Corwin. It was a sort of a big band. It had a horn section, 2 keyboard players, 2 guitar players, drums, and I went to the concert at the theater there at the college, and I went backstage and met them, and that's how I met Bob Greenlee, who owned King Snake Studios and Records, and that became my next endeavor, which was being his engineer at his studio in Sanford for nearly 15 years. And we did hundreds of records out of there with, Rufus Thomas, James Taylor's brother, Alex, and close to 100 records I think we did over 15 years. Wow. And that was my engineering, because I was, that was always my second interest, because even when I was young and in a band, like one guy's dad, well, he has a PA,
Yeah.
Well, Bryan, he can play a little bit, but, he has a tape recorder.
Right. We're going to put it all together.
Get him with get the guy with the tape recorder. We can set that up, So I was always the guy that had microphones at the band practice, So it was always an interest of mine. So I did that for a long time. I had a band and played in Orlando area called Blue House, a quartet. And so I played the blues and on the weekends and engineered all week. And we had I played sessions and engineered sessions, and did that for a long time until I actually met Lonesome Dave first before Molly Hatchet.
Gotcha.
Funny enough. My band Blue House, we were playing, I think not far from here, up on Lee Road. There used to be a blues club, blues rock club. And it was the Winter Park Brewing Company. Do you remember that? Remember that place? I think they shut down over noise problems with a neighbor, but it was a beautiful, all wooden club. It was an ale house. They had made beer, and they had blues night. And we're playing, and my friend Pat Travers, I'm sure you know Pat, he's a local, great famous guitarist, brought Lonesome Dave, who had just moved from England to Orlando, and was looking for musicians to put together a band. They came to see our band, and we sat in, had a jam session at the club, and me and Dave hit it off, famously as friends, and that was my introduction to Foghat. So I played with Lonesome Dave, which we were called Lonesome Dave's Foghat. Roger was up in New York and still had, the guys from the original band. Dave had been on hiatus in England. And so it was great. We started playing first locally and then nationally, and did that for 4 years with Dave. And then Roger and Dave got back together. And I had just finished a European tour in all over Europe with Molly Hatchet, Lonesome Dave's Foghat and Molly Hatchet. So we toured around there.
Wow.
And they knew that Dave, we all knew that Dave was getting back together with Roger and all the original members at the behest of Rick Rubin, the famous record producer, wanted to produce a Foghat record, but he wanted all the original members. So I was out of a job basically, and Danny Joe Brown was still singing with Molly Hatchet then. And so one of the last shows, he said, "Bryan, I know what's going on. You want to join our band?" I was like, "Yes, thank you." Yes, sir, thank you.
Let's go.
So when we came back to the States, I basically got off of Dave's bus and then got on the Molly Hatchet bus, and
Wow.
and I think I learned to set on the way to our first show, which I got on the bus in Florida, and then our first show was in the top of Maine.
Wow.
So I was on headphones the whole time, and I had to learn like 10 or 12 songs. They're complicated, but I was happy to have a job. And funny enough, my first show with Molly Hatchet was with the newly reformed Foghat.
Wow.
So I walk into the arena, and I get off the Molly Hatchet bus, and I get in, and I walk into the backstage, and I walk right into the Foghat dressing room, because I've been doing it for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And Roger's practicing, he practices a little drunk, and he looks up and goes, "Wrong dressing room, mate."
And you're like,
Oh,
right,
oh, right.
right,
Yeah. I'm over there.
here. Exit stage, right? Or left.
Yeah, right. So, and I hadn't met Roger at that point, but of course we're like brothers now, and but that was so funny, And, but then I did that for 7 years, and it was really, I loved playing Southern rock music because there's a lot of harmony guitars. So as a guitar player, it was very challenging music, and I did 3 albums with them in Germany. We signed to a label called SPV, and we spent a lot of time in Europe because of our label connection there, and we toured. Didn't get never got the most of Italy, which I was bummed out about, but we played almost everywhere else. And the records were good. I think the first one was Devil's Canyon, Silent Reign of Heroes, and then Kingdom of the 12 are the 3 that I did with them. And so in 7 years, and we're back in the States touring, going into my 8th year, and Lonesome Dave calls me up, and I kept in touch with him, but he had gotten sick with cancer, but was in remission at this point in time. And he called me on the phone and said, "Dave, Dave, Bryan, I feel like doing a little playing." And I said, "Sure, man. When I'll be home in a couple of days, I'll come over to the house and we can sit and jam." He goes, "No, I want to go on tour again."
Wow.
I go, "Oh,
okay."
I go, "Well, I have to quit my band." He goes, "Okay, I'll see you in New York on Thursday."
He said, "Okay."
I'll have
Well, hang on a minute. I got to quit.
said,
this
I have to
other
quit.
thing."
I have to quit my band. He goes, "Okay, I'll have Mike call you with tickets, and I'll see you in New York on Thursday." I was like,
Oh wow, Thursday. Okay, what day was it?
"This was like Monday. I don't know. I can't remember.
Wow.
But it was like the beginning. Maybe it was the weekend. Because we were doing a show. So he was my best friend, and he just had been sick and everything. So I actually gave my notice that at rehearsal that day.
So guys,
By the way,
about this, thanks for the opportunity. I got to go.
and so I actually played in both bands, for like 4 weeks. I would rehearse with Foghat, and then fly out and do Molly Hatchet shows, and because I trained my replacement,
Gotcha.
and had to teach them all my parts, and gave everybody enough notice to.
Okay, so you just didn't kick him
No,
to the curb.
no, I
Like,
didn't kick-
listen,
no, no,
my
I
buddy
didn't.
called,
No,
so
I
I got to
didn't
go.
No, I went, but
Yeah.
I did due diligence, in helping them
That's
get,
good.
get restructured. And I was so happy to play with Dave again. And I only got to play with him for a year before, he passed on. So it was an important year for me.
Yeah.
And I, and that sort of became, Lonesome Dave. I don't know when you meet people in life that I call it pinball moments, where you meet somebody and your life just goes a whole different way. Yeah. That was me meeting Dave. Because when I was playing the club in Orlando, I was working at the studio. That was pretty much what I was doing. Yeah. And then I met Dave, and he got me back on the circuit. And then I met Molly Hatchet. So, he was a real important guy.
That's awesome.
Can't talk too much.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I understand.
But yeah, so that was, and here I am 23 years later, with Foghat still.
I love it. I love it. You are so incredibly talented. I mean, I only told a handful of people because I wanted it to be like this big surprise for everyone that I had coming. And the few people that I did tell, they were like, oh man, he's a killer guitar player.
Well, thank you.
You really are. You truly are. Your riffs are just phenomenal. I mean, they're so clean. They're amazing. What are some of your favorite songs to play? Like, what's your ultimate go-to?
Well, I like slow blues, and I like old blues. And Foghat has several songs in the category, in the catalog. Well, we do It Hurts Me Too, and that was a big one with Dave. And Scott Holt, our new singer, crushes it on guitar and singing it. And I think one of your favorites too is Terraplane Blues, right? Yes. And that's one of my faves.
Yes.
And we played that for many years. It was in our set. We just recently took it out, and we play a lot to the same fans. So every year we try to, we play the same 4 or 5 songs that we have, our hits, and then we try to go deep tracks. And so it's not in it this year, but if you come, maybe we'll have to work it up so we have it.
Oh my goodness, I would love that. There's just something about listening to. I mean, I could go to, Sanford, like to Tuffy's or something, and sit there and listen to someone playing a Flying V, nice slide. Some really good blues musician play, and when they sing well on top of that, you get in a moment. There's nothing like that.
I just worked on a record by a young musician, local, Dyer Davis, and I think, we have mutual friends, Billy Chapin and my friend Stephen Dees produced that record, and he's a local guitar player that does exactly what you just said. He sings great, plays great. It's a really good record. I mastered it, so all the hard work was done, and they sent it to me, to get ready for distribution. Yeah. And but when I heard it, I looked back and said, "This is really good." So
When I heard his voice, I was like, "He's how old? He's only 20-something, right? Early 20s." Yeah. And I'm like, why does he have the soul of a 40, 50, 60? You know what I mean?
He really can sing
soul.
it.
He really does.
And it's and it's not. He's not a belter, but he's a soulful singer.
Absolutely.
Really great. So I think he's going to make a splash in the blues world this year.
Oh yeah.
Like Chris Stone, and I keep in touch with a lot of people. I did a lot of records for Alligator, so Bruce Iglauer. I've known him for decades, and we every once in a while go up to the Memphis Blues Awards, and I have several friends, Billy Price, that got an award last year. Victor Wainwright, I've worked on many of his records, and he's a multiple award-winning pianist. It's fantastic. Yes. And I got to work with Lucky Peterson, was one of our King Snake artists who passed away not too long ago, but he was one of the greatest keyboard players I ever heard in the Jimmy Smith organ style, plus he could play wicked guitar. Nice. And Kenny Neal, who's a pretty big blues star, came out of the King Snake. He was one of our first artists at King Snake, and but yeah, so we had a lot of artists came through. Dr. Hector and the Groove Injectors, were a local Florida band that we did many records with. Smokehouse, local band, we did through King Snake. I did produce 4 or 5 records with them, local musicians. And King Snake was really focused on southeastern blues, people from like New Orleans, Baton Rouge, what they would call swamp rock or swamp blues. And the cello sound, like the old blues records, like Lonesome Sundown and Lightning Slim, all those kind of old blues records. So that was the focus of our label that we did for many years, and a lot of those artists are still out there touring and have moved, or into now they're sort of seniors now, because but this is 20 some years past or more. So as a local concern, Bob Greenlee did a fantastic job. It was almost like a Muscle Shoals kind of environment. Only
I was about to say, we didn't Skinner out there.
Yeah,
and
exactly,
vibe.
And that whole thing.
I loved it.
So as riff on this, you have a lot of potential to talk to a lot of people, because I don't think there's so many people that are down here. I mean, and half the rock bands that I know actually live here now. I mean, Blue Oyster Cult guys were down here.
I love it.
Cheap Trick was down here. The singer from
Hall & Oates too, right?
Hall & Oates and
See?
AC/DC. And
Yeah,
I lived in New Smyrna for 20 some years. I'm down a little bit further in Edgewater now, but we used to call that like the rock mom central, because Neil Young's mom lived there.
My mom lived there.
The singer from Georgia Satellite, mom lived there. Greg Allman's mom lived there. So you'd be sitting on down there, Breakers or something. You'd see tour buses go down.
Flagler Avenue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
big spot. Still is. I mean, you can still go down there and hear some really great music from, at times.
Right.
It's a great setup and everything. But no, when people, I've said this plenty of times, people forget that there's a lot of music here. And did Molly Hatchet actually form? Was it in Daytona?
Well, they were from Jacksonville.
They were from Jacksonville,
right?
okay.
But Pat Armstrong was their manager, and pretty much got them the record deal and everything else. And they recorded at BJ Recording, which is a famous Florida.
Used to be right down the street.
Yeah, recording studio.
On Lee Road.
And I think before Full Sail existed, Pat Armstrong I think he had a facility that had a couple, big famous consoles, recording consoles in it, and it was like a teaching facility up here in Altamont somewhere. So, so these were pretty much associated with this area because of Pat. They came down here to record, and I think You Got Another Thing Coming was recorded at that studio by.
Really?
Yeah, You Got Another Thing Coming. Yeah. I mean, that song that was recorded at BJ's, and
wow.
So it had a really good reputation.
The sound of rock and roll has obviously changed over the years. There's so many different variations of it now. You have metal. You have the southern rock that we've had, a classic rock, contemporary. We have grunge. We've had all these different changes over the years. How have you kind of seen that through your eyes as a musician? How do you feel whenever you see these different kind of little moments pop up that really impact people over the years?
I'm very interested in it from several perspectives. One being, recording engineering perspective, and see how is this record produced? Is it how computer based is it? How live is it? When I do my records, particularly blues, which was almost documentary style recording, you wanted the production values to be almost invisible and just to have the artists be them. They're as real as possible. Two bands like our band Foghat, I have all the computer digital skills that I, could use anywhere, but that I still record like we're recording on tape, where we do, instead of fixing it in the mix, I would say, okay, well, let's do that song again from the beginning altogether, So I track like the 70s,
nice.
Only on, modern equipment. So, that's an interesting thing of how, when I listen to a new record by a new band, how much is, this is Memorex, or, how much is this, how much is this live performance? That being said, there's so many great new talents coming out there, great blues guitarists playing, Gary Clark Jr.,
Love him.
Love him. And so the blues, and Dyer and Chris Stone, and, so the blues is really coming into its own for a new generation, so that's a big interest of mine. My daughter is in classical percussionist at Stetson University now in the orchestra. So she's, she plays great jazz bass too. But she would bring me charts home and she'd go, "Dad, can you help me with this part?" I go, "Could you put it on the YouTube or something so I could hear it?" I mean, I can read, but not that. I said so she went past me, and now she's an orchestral musician. So I'm very interested in that and listening to Stetson University's orchestra is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm gonna have to talk to your daughter, by the way. I'm just saying, I'm just gonna put it out there in the universe.
Okay.
What's her name?
Jordan.
Jordan.
Jordan Bassett. Yeah.
Got my eye on you.
Yeah,
or my ear on.
Yeah, she picked up bass right away and played, and she was pretty advanced for her age, and so she's very pleased to be at college level now. So,
Yeah.
She was a little frustrated at her the youth, things weren't really up to her standards. So she grinned a bit,
She's like, okay, listen, I'm over. Can we stop playing this Christmas special? And can I get on to the real stuff, the real heart, the blues power? So you know what I mean?
And so she loves it. So she's got that bug. And then my other daughter, Bryn, who's a trauma nurse, but her and my wife are metal fans. So they go to Rockville and they would fly. They flew out to see Green Day out in California, and they go see all these other bands. And so I get that, they tell me who's good and who's not. I was a big fan of Foo Fighters, and Heavy Chevy. Was it Heavy Chevy, the drummers band? And,
I like, was it,
And I was having to keep up with music too when I was teaching at the college with my ensembles, because I would say, okay, class, what songs do you want to play? We picked 8 or 10
they're
songs.
like Basket Case, and you're like, what?
Well, yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'd say, okay, well, bring it in, and we'd have a listening session, and I'd say, all right, now who are my singers? You can't bring in a Led Zeppelin song and have no one can sing like Robert Planter. So I had to match up songs with the personnel in my class. But that being said, I got into a lot of new music, like the Muse and all that. I mean, I really like them, and I would have probably not heard them had not a student brought it in. So that's and Royal Blood, and there's quite a few interesting bands that have just 2 guys. That's such a weird. It's something like a White Stripes thing. Mm-hmm. I went to see Jack White too. That was a cool show. I went to see him not too long ago.
Nice.
And very interesting. And but there's a couple bands that just have like the Black Keys, drummer, guitar player. So interesting sound. So that's always interesting just from listening to the records. How do they make these things sound full with 2 people?
Right. Right. Exactly.
And how they do that live. So. Yeah, so I'm constantly listening to things.
Learning and listening.
Yeah.
So where do you see, so we're getting near the end of the show here, where do you see yourself the next 10, 15?
Well, I'm sure Roger told this, and I was actually eavesdropping, but, rock till you're old, and what do I say? Roll till you're old, rock till you drop.
There you go. You go.
I expect to be like, thank you, good night.
Oh, man.
But no, playing music is a joy, and I said, what would I do if I retired? I'd get together and play music with my friends. So So that's sort of what I do.
So why stop?
Yeah, so why stop? So I'll play, and we have our own recording studio near here, in Central Florida, and a band house. I have all my recording gear there. We get together, write, rehearse, pretty much at our leisure, and we record things all the time, and once we get a certain amount of songs that we think are good enough, then we start contemplating a release and put our manager, Linda, to work, put her third hat on, and she starts preparing it for release to our fans. But that's probably what we'll continue to do. Tour, we still love touring, and we don't do 15 weeks at a time on a tour bus, but we fly everywhere now, and backline companies have come drastic. In the old days, it's like, well, I need a Marshall, and they go, well, my Uncle Joe has a twin reverb. Will that do? And I go, well, yeah, I don't know, not really. But now so many bands travel like us, where we fly and we bring essential gear, and we use backline companies, which are basically traveling music stores. And we've worked with them so many years now that they have our list. Foghat's coming to Las Vegas. We got a Foghat show. They pull all the stuff we need, and it's all brand new. And so it's a really, cost-effective and clean way to travel.
Yeah.
And we do, I guess, 50 to 70 shows a year is sort of our normal thing.
But it's not like work.
No, it's
right?
not.
I mean, you're doing this with your friends that have become your family.
Exactly. And we play for free. We get paid to travel. That's our
There you go.
That's my T-shirt for that. But we have, everybody loves each other. Our new singer, Scott's fantastic. And I think Raj told you the story about the Earl and the Agitators, how that came about. We got together just for a fun writing session. We ended up with so many songs, we had to start another band.
See what happens? Like you guys, I'm sure the amount of conversations and laughs and creative moments that you guys have is just, extensive.
Yeah,
when you guys get together.
Yeah, and you never know, unless you're together, there's things don't happen. Because I'm a type of person, and I think, it's Roger, Scott, and I, and Rodney, our bass player. We sort of are more creative together because someone will have a germ of an idea, someone adds to it, and we bounce things around.
Group consensus.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think we write better as a group than, I don't consider myself that much of a songwriter. Scott's probably the purest songwriter in the group. And so I come up with a guitar riff or a part or maybe a song title. And so, it's sort of like, group communication and creativity. So that's how we work best.
Wow, I love it. I love it. What would you say, as far as, one of those moments that you want to share with people that really stood out to you over your career, over the years? Like what the one defining moment that you were just like, oh yeah, that's it. Something I'm going to remember the rest of my life.
I'll tell you something that I'll remember the rest of my life is when I was, I was an athlete in high school, and I was academic as well, and I had a college scholarship to Carnegie Mellon, which is a pretty big school in Pittsburgh. And I turned it down to go live in a condemned building in Lima, Ohio, and play in a band. And I told my parents that.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I'm pretty sure they were like, what?
Expecting them to lose their mind. And funny enough, they did. And they were like, my dad in particular, he was a truck driver all his life, ex-Marine, and actually ex-Army. Actually, shouldn't get that mixed up. But he was an avid reader, and I think he wanted to be a writer. So when I told him what I wanted to do, he was like, okay, well, I can get behind that. And then not too long after that, because I graduated 72, and in 76, played that funky music hit, right? So I got to, and my dad died young. He died in his 50s. But we played the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh. I think I played there several times, but we were opening up for the Isley Brothers, I think. And my parents were in attendance, and it was a sold out show. And so that's a precious moment to me that they saw me have success, after turning on, full scholarship.
I turned down my scholarship to go live in a condemned building. Yeah. I'll see you later.
I had a really bad meeting with a counselor. I came in, well, of course, I had hair, I had rubber plant hair. I mean, it was great.
I've seen your locks.
But I walked in there, and I think the counselor took one look at me and was like, okay. And I wanted to major in music, but they wouldn't accept guitar as an instrument unless it had to be a classical instrument, piano. So I had an attitude. She had an attitude. I was like, So I started taking some. Yes, I started taking some composition classes at Pitt, which I paid for myself. That only lasted a year till our band took off. And so, but that as my moment. That was my parents in attendance, seeing their boy on the big stage.
That's beautiful.
That's a good one.
That's a really great and just a wonderful memory to have. I know that's something that you cherish those moments like that, especially when it's with family and your extended family, your band members and everything. So, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your personal story.
Well, thank you.
You're an amazing, amazing artist. I just adore listening to you. So keep riffing on this,
good. I like that.
You like that? I like that. Thank you for tolerating my really bad sense of humor I have over here. So, but again, thank you so much for spending your time and out of your busy touring schedule and recording schedule. I really appreciate you.
Hey, well, I'm so glad someone's doing a program like this. So congratulations, and
thank you.
Be glad to do it anytime or help you out in any way. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. That really means the world to me. That's going to do it for this episode of Riff on This. Be sure to stay locked in tight. I'll have another episode coming to you soon. Thanks for listening to Riff on This. A huge thank you to our rockin' guest, Bryan Bassett. And be sure to follow Bryan by following the band on Instagram or Facebook by searching Foghat. And don't forget, you can link me on my social media. Just search Samara Kokinas News 6 on Facebook and Twitter. On Instagram, search Samara Kokinas. And before we go, a huge thank you to our behind-the-scenes production team, Derek Mosier, Ryan Haley, Chris Flora, Joe Grennan, and Bob Myers. Please take some time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget, sharing is caring, so tell a friend about us too. You can find videos of all the podcast episodes on clickorlando.com/riffonthis. Until next time, friends.